Hi there. It's time for another laid back, chilled out, light-hearted vlog post from Eric. And you better agree with what I say. Don't go away. Don't turn off the video. You better agree with what I say. Oh, Eric, you're not professional. Eric, you don't act professional enough. You should act more professional. You should you should manipulate people like in more you should manipulate people more. You should make people like you more. Oh, change your background. All right, whatever. I'll stop complaining. Okay, laid back. It's laid back. No drama. Just laid back, chill, lighthearted, easygoing. So today, I want to talk about the meaning of life. I'm not really sure exactly what I want to say. No notes. I'm just going to ramble on. So, that's your warning. Um, so, when people say the meaning of life, that's kind of like what people get from that term is, what's your own personal meaning of life? And that's kind of like what I'm talking about as well. I just want to make the distinction between what I'm talking about, what I'm really talking about, and what people think of when you say the meaning of life. Like, oh, what's your personal meaning of life? Because people, they make their own meaning for themselves. Like, oh, my personal meaning to life is to make the most beautiful photograph ever. All right, and that makes sense. That's what people are talking about when they say the meaning of life. Um, but why? Why do you feel that you need to make the most beautiful photograph? Number two, what will that accomplish? What's the point? Um, so where do you get the motivation? What's the point? And what do you mean by most beautiful? What does that even mean? Well, I'm not really going to go into that, but what I'm saying, what the meaning of life really is that I'm referring to, is something that answer the great ultimate meaning of life. It's something that would answer all of those questions, and it also has to be something that is pretty obvious. Like, it can't be anything else. And so, like, and I've said before previously that for planners, people that plan into the future, like long distance into the future, um, the meaning of life becomes something that it's more like an anticipation of a future event, which must happen. It must happen. Um, and that's what the meaning of life would be. But then, if you get into the whole, time doesn't really exist, like how we see it, then basically the meaning of life becomes not a future event, like the conclusion of the universe or something like that. Not really a future event, but simply what reality is. You could say currently. So it's not like, oh, you're waiting for it. Because in the context of time, it's not like it's going to happen. Because it's more like it's outside of time. So that's what I mean by the meaning of life. And many times before, I've suggested that the meaning of life is mysticism, or related to the term or the concept of mysticism. But in today's rambling vlog post, I think that I'm going to use a different term in place of mysticism. I'm going to use the term Gnosis, spelled with a G, Gnosis, because I'm going to talk in the context of yet another Jeffrey Mishlove interview with Jason Reza Giorgiani, the one about Gnosticism. And I will probably link to that interview. And, feel free to watch it. Feel free to watch it 5 times in a row and take notes and read all of the books that are presented. If you feel like it. Not telling you to do it, just so, in the context of what Jason Reza Giorgiani is saying, all right, so he brings up in the first couple minutes, he talks about this distinction between 2 words, episteme and gnosis. And these are Greek words, and they're 2 words that mean knowledge, but they're different kinds of knowledge. Episteme is more like the systematic knowledge, like you go through the motions, you do task after task, and you acquire systematic knowledge, you learn things. Or a scientist says it. A scientist says something to you about, I don't know, the crust in mountains, something or other, and you gain knowledge, episteme. And then contrary, or in contrast to this type of knowledge, is the word gnosis, which is like an intuitive form of knowing. You just know, man. And I would say that this only applies to people that are right. Because people all the time, they're like, oh man, I know this to be true, man. And they're completely wrong. Like, just because you have intuition doesn't mean you're right. And so, you could call that gnosis, but what I'm talking, I don't care what those people are talking about. What I'm talking about is something different. I'm talking about gnosis as in a kind of knowledge that is contrary to the normal way we view knowledge, which is episteme. And I've said before that this remote viewing is I haven't used the word gnosis before, but I've said that remote viewing is gnosis in practice, and that is what gnosis. That is an example of gnosis, and I think that. Well, actually, to be more accurate, remote viewing would be a synonym for gnosis. And other forms of gnosis would simply be other forms of remote viewing. Because the gnosis I'm talking about right now, is a gnosis that is not knowledge not knowledge that is acquired by, you know, entering the implicate order. More like knowledge that is remembered, knowledge that you already have, that you've always had. That kind of idea. And remote viewing represents that. So, this idea that I am presenting, that I'm calling Gnosis, is it would be a good word to use instead of mysticism, um, to be an answer to what is the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? Gnosis. And so I'm just gonna go a little bit more in depth on that. So, Gnosis. Um, um, Gnosis is well, this is a part of rambling. It's stopping to collect thoughts. Let's see, where do I start? Gnosis. I mean, I've already started. Come on, I've been rambling for like what? Does it say 12 minutes? Gosh, oh my gosh. Okay. um, the Hindus, for example, they view time as being cyclical, like cycle within cycle within cycle. Time is a cyclical thing. We live in this cyclical universe, cycle after cycle. Cycle after cycle, and the cycles are self-similar and hierarchical because the system, the mechanism is self-similar and hierarchical. And there are a lot of things that go with that. That mechanism that I'm talking about is the cause for a lot of other things, like the dichotomy between good and evil, or life and death, or I guess you could say light and dark. Yeah, it's the distinction between objects, and this mechanism causes a reality that is self-similar and hierarchical. And the metaphor that is used by a lot of different people is a hologram, because holograms are kind of like self-similar and hierarchical. So, what Gnosis is in this context is the ascending of the cycles, the cyclical nature, otherwise known as the explicate order. So it would be ascending the explicate order and that's from David Bohm's holographic theory or whatever. Theory, hypothesis. Oh. Shut up. God. So it'd be ascending. The explicate order, it'd be like tapping into the implicate order, true reality. And that's what Gnosis represents. Somehow you're bypassing all of these illusory phenomena, which are a result of the mechanism. And that's what Gnosis is. It's mysticism. It's reaching the end result of the universe, which is not a period of time. It's not, oh, that event way in the future over there. It is, in terms of time, doesn't really exist how it is. So it's actually currently how the universe is, and that's the meaning of life. So, therefore, Gnosis is the meaning of life. You know, and a lot of people would agree with me on that. That idea, these ideas, I didn't make up. This is really old shit. It's just monism 101. Get out of here, fly. Okay, so one of the things that is pretty much from me is an idea about more about like what the mechanism is, and that's you know, you kind of have to get into that eventually. You know, you can only talk about this philosophy stuff for so long before you start getting into like the mechanism. You can talk about ether all day long, uh, but eventually you gotta explain what the heck you're talking about, buddy. What the heck you're talking about, ontologically speaking. What are you talking about when you say the word ether? And ontologically, what are you talking about? That's a mechanism. You're talking about a mechanism. Okay. So I have this mechanism in mind. I might be wrong. I might be right. Um, it seems like it makes sense. Seems like it makes sense. And a lot of theories involve something that's extremely similar to this, which is, you know, it's an argument for authority, but you know, some people need that. So I would say that the mechanism is stereographic projection, specifically stereographic projection. You have the implicate order, you got the explicate order. The explicate order is a stereographic projection of the implicate order. That's the mechanism. And the mechanism causes all these things like hierarchical and self-similar universe with these dichotomies, life and death, good and evil, and all these things. And that's not really how the universe is like in its true form. It's just kind of like the hologram, so to speak. Okay. Now, the real purpose of bringing this up again for like the third or fourth time is to point out that this mechanism that I'm suggesting is the mechanism is projection, a form of projection, and the essence of a projection is a light source. A light source. It's not actually light in terms of like actual light, but it's more like a mathematical kind of light. It's like an origin point, which is required of projection. And so I have begun to think that maybe all this ancient stuff talking about the origin of the universe that involves some kind of character that you would call the light bearer, bringing some kind of knowledge to the universe. Knowledge. Now, I've been thinking that all this ancient stuff, talking about light being some kind of origin point, I think that might be a reference to the mechanism of stereographic projection, communicated in the form of characters that are personify. What's the word? You know, turn into like a character, a person. I forget the word. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So there's so many examples, and in that interview, Jason Reza Giorgiani brings up, for example, the allegory of the cave, which is very Gnostic because it's kind of talking about like a group of people that are malevolent and causing a projection which results in illusion. Um, and that's kind of what Gnosticism is generally. It's not really, you know, solidly defined, but that's generally what Gnosticism is kind of like the idea that there's like malevolent forces that are causing the illusion. Um, and he brings up another thing. He brings up is the Genesis in the Bible, and he says that definitely the only possible explanation of Genesis is that the serpent is like the protagonist. Um, and and again, he brings up the concept of not, and this is like later on in the interview, and I'm anyway. He's saying that, well, you know, um, knowledge is a good thing, and you know, I don't really care for uh, you know the Bible. I'm not like one of those people like a Christian who views the Bible as like the basis of truth. That's ridiculous. Partially because just because you have hallucination, that doesn't mean you're a prophet. People have hallucinations all the time. You can't prove that you're a prophet. You can't in any form prove that you're a prophet, and you don't know if you're a prophet or not. You just like I mean, to have a hallucination, that's one thing. I mean, sure, you know, you do you, but to call yourself a prophet, I mean, come on, dude. Come on. Also, like, you know, the Bible's been translated multiple times through different languages and edited many times for political purposes, like non-Christian purposes. And if you try and tell that to a Christian, they're all like, "Oh my God, you're just a Satanist trying to tempt me," or something. Um, and on a side note, I've said that they're trying to push like Scientology on us. Scientology, that's still kind of a good word because it represents dualism and it represents like the general kind of belief, but it's not. It's never really been that accurate of word. It's still probably the most accurate, concise word for this belief system they're pushing on us. But in the context of this interview, it makes sense to say that they're pushing Gnosticism, and Gnosticism is in a lot of ways related to Scientology. Like I would say that Scientology is a form of Gnosticism that's explicitly dualist. And I don't think that they think in those terms. That's just how my mind works. I think that uh, the strategy is more along the lines of pushing Gnosticism as opposed to pushing dualism over monism. Whatever, doesn't matter. And it would be an inorganic religion that's conducive to new world order, one world globalized government. All right, makes sense. Makes sense. Uh, the super secret knowledge, however, that's explicitly monist. I wouldn't say it's like Gnostic per se. I wouldn't say it's like Neoplatonist. It's I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. So yeah. Like, can't can't I be paid to be a shill? I want to be paid to be a shill. Like, can I do that job? Like, oh yeah, yeah. I'll push Gnosticism on people. Yeah, yeah. Pay me to push Gnostic. Yeah, I'll do that. Oh man. All right. Well, should I keep rambling on? I don't know. It's been like so much longer. I just ramble on for days, don't I? People call me, oh Eric, you're so quiet. Why don't you talk more? And I go, yeah, I get that a lot. And in my head, I'm like, nah.